All right, we are recording.
And we'll call this meeting to order. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for
which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mary, can you do roll call, please?
Yes. Western Lane Ambulance District Director Farnsworth.
Here.
Director Yesney.
Here.
Director Webb.
Here.
Director Russell.
Here.
And Director Murphy.
Here.
Lisa Valley Fire and Rescue Director Green.
Here.
Director Hickson.
Here.
Director Polisi.
Here.
Director Spade.
He is here.
And Director Burns. WLFEA Director Polisi.
Here.
Director Russell.
Here.
Director Murphy.
Here.
Director Spade.
Here.
Did you do Western Lane Ambulance correct the first time, Mary? Or did you have Ned in that group?
I don't think I did.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Are you recruiting?
So we have quorums. So is anybody signed up for public speaking?
No,
Would anybody in the public like to say anything? Hearing none. Would any of the directors like to move any of the consent agenda items to regular discussion? I'm not hearing any. So the consent agenda consists of the meeting minutes from September 24th, staff reports from the fire chief, operations chief, and the office manager. We have no correspondence. And then future business announcement. That meeting is actually the third Thursday in November. It is the 19th. That's the correct date, but it's the third Thursday. And we're going to be moving those out of the consent agenda. We'll just put those at like we used to. But are there any objections to anything in the consent agenda? Thank you. So we'll move on to review of monthly financials. Dina.
okay, thank you. I don't have a lot to report. We are done with our first quarter of the fiscal year. So hold on a sec, I'm just admitting somebody from the public who dropped off. So 3 months in, we should be around 25% of expenses. And to me, the financials are looking good. As I put in my report, the payment for Siuslaw Valley Fire has been received from the Oregon Department of Forestry, about $19,500 for the Sweet Creek fire that some of our staff went on. And the other thing I wanted to mention for Western Lane Ambulance is on the balance sheet, it now shows a change for the pension liability. We did put this in just to show you how it looks, and this is something that the board can discuss if you would like. Other than that, I am available for questions.
I'd like Director Yesney to explain how he put that together.
Sure. So I received a request from staff to look at putting on the balance sheet the liability and accounting, basically the accounting for not only PERS, but for future payroll liabilities that are committed by the district. And an easy way to do that is to go back to the audit, and the audit has these numbers in there that we've added to the balance sheet, which is the deferred outflow of resources on the page 34 account number 1340. And then there are deferred liabilities on the liability page 35 of our report. Account number 2800, net other post-employment benefits. I think this is a commitment to future medical payments for retirees. So it's really in addition to PERS, there's also some other commitments the district has in the future that are valued in today's dollars. And account number 2810 is the net pension liability for PERS. And then 2820 is pension and post-employment. Don't ask me to explain those. They're in the audit. I still can't quite figure it all out, but that is the liabilities under GASB that our auditor came up with. And then in equity, to make it all balance, you have to post decrease to equity because it's an added net liability. So under equity on page 35, account number 3015, net pension and post-employment shows a negative fund balance from that entry of about $1.3 million. You can see that it's also right under investment in capital of $1.3 million, and that investment in capital reflects our fixed asset balance on page 34, which is not a change. That was already in there. And really that entry, the investment in capital, is part of what I'd call full accrual accounting. So we kind of had the asset side of full accrual accounting, but we did not have the pension liability on the balance sheet. So this kind of gets us to a full GASB type of financial statement, closer to our audit, on at least on the balance sheet side.
Hey, Rick, using that, what happens year over year if the actuarial changes the amount that we're set up for as a liability? Is it a cash event, positive or negative? How do we recognize that?
Well,
it's going to trigger some changes on the balance sheet.
Good question. Yes, it will. So you'd only adjust these balances once a year. So this really is from our annual audit. The auditor, who should have our 2020 fiscal year audited by the end of December, which is going to be a question I was going to ask, how the audit was coming along. They'll come through and readjust these once a year, and we'll post those adjustments. So it really just sits there once a year. It's not going to be valued month by month. There'll be no changes on a monthly basis. It'd just be once a year when our auditor comes through and figures all these balances out. But I think the request from Director Farnsworth was that the district needed to show the pension liability on the balance sheet for the public to recognize that liability is there. And this is an easy way to do it where it doesn't take staff time. It's really just a once a year adjustment to about 4 or 5 accounts, and does reflect the liability according to GASB filed auditor's report.
I was thinking about it from a slightly different angle. So say next year we have a net pension liability of $2.5 million, and we'll have an offset to our equity position. Does that show as a loss on our books to net income, or how does the equity change? Is it just
only changes the balance sheet? So the changes in the assets and liabilities in those various accounts would then be adjusted in the equity statement in account 3015. So
we wouldn't recognize it. We wouldn't recognize it in income in any way, shape, or form as a plus or a minus. We're just going to make a one-time annual adjustment to the balance sheet for this entry. Okay,
exactly.
Similar to the audit.
So the nice thing about that is it leaves our profit and loss statement on a budgetary basis. You know, the same basis we budget on. So it doesn't impact operations.
So I had a couple of suggestions. This is accounting speak. So when we're looking at our balance sheet, when we have a deferred outflow of resources and we count that as an asset, what's a good way to describe that?
I don't know.
I think what they're trying to say is, you owe this money, but we're not going to collect it from you today. That's a deferred outflow of resources. So I believe that the auditor is using the Milliman report to determine our unfunded actuarial liability. And as you recall, when we had the PERS representative come, that could be anywhere between this number, 2.1 million, and 3.6 million. And it varies widely based on how the market is doing at the point at which they take the snapshot. So when Milliman produces their report, which they do every 2 years, they'll give us an update, which the auditors can use. But to count the money that we owe to PERS as an asset, because they're not asking for us to pay it today, that's not much of an asset.
Well, I think the request was to record this in accordance with GASB, and we have
Yes.
audited financial statements. So we need to understand what GASB is trying to do with those
Sure.
those line items. And frankly, looking through the audit and doing some research, I'm still not sure what they're trying to do with that.
Right. Now, I was looking up GASB, and I had one suggestion. If I may share my screen for a second. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is financial reporting of deferred outflow of resources and deferred inflow of resources. And if you look at impact on CAFR, number 2, and number 1, deferred outflow of resources should be reported as a separate section following assets in the statement of financial position. So what I'm suggesting is line 1340, which is our deferred outflow of resources, should really be moved to a separate category at the bottom of the balance sheet, at least at the bottom of the asset section. Because I think that's what GASB is asking for here. Same thing with the deferred inflow of resources should be reported as a separate section following liabilities in the statement of financial position. I'll be happy to send this on to you if you need it.
Why don't we have Dina run that question by the auditor?
I think that's a great idea. What I'm curious about, I know we had some discussion about how we felt that the auditor did, but our previous auditor never did this at all, never had deferred outflow of resources listed on the balance sheet. So I'm curious why that happened that way and why it happened all of a sudden with this auditor, and how are we determining what that deferred outflow of resources number is? Because if we get a letter from Milliman that says our unfunded liability is $2.2 million, how does he calculate the asset that we're claiming against it? So I have both questions, but yes, that's a great point, John. We should bounce that back to the auditor and get more instruction and help with that.
So you got that, Dina? You can send that on to.
I'll send this on to you, Dina, and I'll copy you can copy the other board members. So
And since we're recording this, I can always go back and get the language I need.
Yeah, I'll send you this document.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And thank you, Rick, for making a stab at that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Questions for financials? Oh, there was somebody did ask, Director Yesney, you asked if the audit was in progress. And yes, I am getting some email correspondence from both Mark and Kathy. They are working on both districts. And we just signed a contract for the first audit for Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority since that started. So
Well, are they still on track to be done by the end of the year? And
that I don't know, but we
Okay.
have put out, multiple requests that we are hoping that is the goal.
okay, I think last year it came in, I think it was May, and we were pretty rushed to
Right.
approve it, and that didn't really.
Well, they're doing everything remotely right now. I do not anticipate an on-site visit. The nice thing about QuickBooks Online is that a lot of our scanned documents are already in there and they can do a lot from their office. So they're starting to request extra documents right now and doing their testing. So I'm optimistic.
Good, thank you.
I had a question about the LifeMed report.
All right.
I was looking at the write-offs, 108,000. Wouldn't that be the annual number, not a 3-month number?
Yes, that is a number that we get off of the systems design reports, but that I only have the annual number to work with. So the report each month shows a different end result.
Okay, I thought what we were doing is looking back, was it 12 months, Dina? And then we were going to determine what that average monthly amount was so that we could allocate it into this, because
Right. Well, I'll double check my my formulas on this, but to my knowledge, that's the intent. That's
Right.
what I thought I
Yeah.
was doing.
I think
So
we're one
let me
step
double
away
check
from
that
that.
for you.
Yeah, I think we're just one step away from that. So you can see that our budget doesn't have a number for allowances, which is why it shows a net operating income of 110,000 and our actual is 10,000 right now. So it will be really helpful for us if we can do the look back and then divide by the number of months in the report. So you're correct. That would be a different number each month, but it would be closer to the apportionment period, this being 3 months. And you could use a similar number in the budget. I imagine we probably came up with one at some point, but it's close to what we're looking for.
Yeah, I might have done one of the calculations in error, so I'll double check that.
Okay. And if nobody else has any other questions, I was just curious. Sometimes when we look at the credit card report, it's unclear to us what some of the things are. So I had some questions about when we see Amazon or MaxTrack. I don't know what MaxTrack is, and I don't know what Care Fusion is. And there's a Verizon wireless charge for $520. I don't know what any of those might be, if anyone recalls.
These are just, since it's a credit card statement, obviously you are just seeing the vendor and not the behind the scenes what it's for. So I would have to go back and double check. I don't remember offhand. There's a lot of transactions that go through each month.
Sure.
So
Sure. Well, we're not doing such a deep dive on the transactions, but it's helpful to know what some of these things are. MaxTrack.
well, I know the Verizon wireless is our monthly bill for.
Okay.
Hotspots.
There you go. Okay.
Yep.
And the Care Fusion is our ventilation equipment for ventilators. It's the part that goes from the ventilator to the machine to the patient. As for MaxTrax, I'd have to, like Dina, go back through and see exactly what the vendor was and what we purchased.
Okay, great. Sometimes it might be, if you anticipate that we might be curious about it, you could just handwrite on the statement here, kind of in the margin, what that's for. That'd be helpful.
We can do that.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, That's it for financials. No old business. We have 2 new business items. We're going to talk about two new business items after the first one. Any SVFR board of director member that wants to leave, you're welcome to do that, because the rest is just for Western Lane Ambulance District. So I know some of you wanted to go to watch the debate, but I would like everybody to pay attention to the copier lease number 5. Go ahead, Dina.
Yes, this is, as I said in my agenda bill, the current copier we have over here at Siuslaw Valley Fire. The 5-year lease is up in about 6 months. And I was contacted by a vendor who gave a proposal. And in order to stay with policy, I went out and got 2 additional quotes. One of them was coincidentally the existing vendor who has the machine here now, coincidentally just contacted me like a week after this other vendor did. So that is one of the 2 additional quotes. So I got 3 quotes, and you've got the information in your packet. And what I decided was that, I mean, they're all very similar quotes, similar machines. I think really the way I would like to go about it is to recommend option 1, which is a little bit more expensive of the 3 quotes, but since it's the same company, swapping out the machines is going to be easy. They are willing to end the current lease 6 months early and wipe off $2,453 and just start with a new lease, which is less expensive than what we're paying now. And we've been happy with them. They've provided good service, and and the machine is fairly similar to what we're using now, which would save time in training staff for a different model. So that's my recommendation, but if the board prefers to go with the lowest quote that I got, that would be option 2, to approve Pacific Office Automation, because they came in the cheapest of the 3.
So this is a WLFEA action item, but we are allowing any Western Lane Ambulance District or SVFR board member to comment on this.
So how many copiers are we talking about?
It's 1 machine.
1 machine.
The heavy duty machine we have here at the fire department.
Some of our office, we have desk printers, but this is the main big machine that takes the volume of the copying that we do here.
So this doesn't include any machines at the ambulance district?
No, the ambulance owns their machine over there, and they just pay for copies for a service agreement.
Well, our small business doesn't pay anything like this for copies. I wondered what other businesses that you folks represent, what are you paying for copy support?
Considerably more.
All right.
Yeah, these quotes are much cheaper than we're paying now. So.
It seems like the first option, we've got 3 things going for us. One of them is we get to wipe off a little over $2,000. 2, we get to have a new contract that costs us less than we're already paying. And 3, which I think is most important, is that we end up with a service that we know is reliable, that we like, and that we're not taking a chance on ending up with a service provider that's not as good as the one that we have right now.
Do you know how many copies we generate annually?
Not off the top of my head, but we were looking at, I believe a month ago on this particular machine, it was close to 4,000 copies.
So can I have a motion from WLFEA board member to go with option 2 for the copiers?
Or option 1?
Or which option are you recommending?
I move that we go with option 1, the National Business Solutions.
Well, option 1 is actually Copytronics.
On my paperwork, that's number 1. So which is number 1?
On the agenda bill, option number 1 is to approve Copytronics, which is the current vendor. I think on my my spreadsheet, I listed National Business Solutions first, but that's not the option that I'm proposing. The options are on the agenda bill.
Okay, so your recommendation is option 1, okay. And that was Cindy's motion, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Polisi, second.
Okay, any further discussion? So WLFEA board members only in favor, say aye.
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 Any WLFEA board members opposed? Okay. So our next new business item is to talk with Liz Loomis. So if any SVFR director would like to leave, you're welcome to stay, but you can also leave if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take that opportunity and go spend time with my grandkids.
Have fun.
Thank you.
I will
Chief,
also, thank you.
Chief Schick,
Yes.
do we need to come back?
Negative.
Okay,
You do not.
I'm backing out.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Okay. Very pleased to introduce Liz Loomis. I have worked with Liz for, I don't know, it was 6-7 years ago, I think. 7 years ago. And pretty much if you are a fire district or any kind of emergency service district and you're doing levy or any kind of communications, you're working with Liz Loomis. So, and both of these districts have worked with Liz in the past. So we asked her to prepare a proposal for working for the Western Lane Ambulance District levy renewal that's coming up next year. So she did provide a proposal. And Liz, I'll let you take over.
Thank you, Chief. It's really good to see your face again. It's not just Liz Loomis, it's also AJ Chippendale who is on the call with us tonight. So AJ and I have worked together now 17 years. Yeah, she's nodding. And so I'd like to point out too that AJ and I have had a partnership longer than any relationship I've ever had in my life. That provides you with comedic relief during this horrible time. I hope you'll laugh.
Yes.
Someone said yes. Yeah. So the purpose of our talk with you tonight is to introduce the two of us, and then I want to go through the proposal and see if the board has any questions about what we are proposing by way of renewing your local option levy. Okay? Yep. Okay. All right. I'm going to take that as a yes. So just by way of my background, so I have been involved in passing tax increase requests for local government for, I would guess it's about 20 years right now. So I served as a mayor, a city council member, a state representative in the state of Washington. And when I chose to get out of people politics, which none of us like right now, I said, hey, how can I still stay involved and do what I love to do, right? Which is support government. And so that really came down to working with local governments to help them pass revenue requests. And so AJ and I work with cities, school districts, but primarily fire districts and ambulance districts in this case are about 65% of our client work. And we work in Washington and Oregon, and we do bond and levy requests. And so your chief approached us and said, hey, is this something you would consider doing? And so we had, I think, Chief, 3 or 4 back and forths about it, because I want to be clear, we interview you as much as you interview us, all right? We are not the type of consulting agency that just takes anyone who thinks they want to pass a tax increase. We want to know that the project is viable and that the agency is willing to be transparent and accountable to folks and include them in the process as you move forward for that ballot measure. And so, AJ, I am responsible for the strategy and probably about 90% of the writing for everything that we do. AJ is younger than me and very tech savvy, social media savvy. And so that's kind of her bailiwick in our company. And yeah, AJ, want to introduce yourself? Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the
AJ,
spot.
Just 6 years younger, not that much younger. Yeah, like Liz said, I do production. I do a lot of the client interfacing and just making sure projects stay on track. And I call myself a professional nag because I do make sure things stay on track and follow up on details. So yeah,
perfect.
We work together.
Okay.
You'll hear a lot from me.
Yeah. And you'll hear a lot from us, to be fair. So the proposal that we put forward for the chief, so anytime you're talking, and you're very fortunate in that you're looking at a simple renewal, right? So that takes a lot of the complication out of it, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to communicate to the folks that you serve. And so the proposal that we put forward to the chief and that you have in front of you incorporates 5 different components for an effective communications plan for something like a local option levy renewal. Pay communication is very important, and that includes things. I'm sorry, I thought someone said something. And so pay communication includes something that the ambulance district will print and mail, basically. We also have an aggressive earned media strategy. No? Okay, sorry. So we also have an aggressive earned media strategy that we're proposing for this particular project. And that's when we do things like news releases, letters to the editor, opinion editorial pieces, and that kind of thing as we kind of head into the election. We also incorporate social and owned media into our communications plan. So that would mean your website, right? We do a nice update to your website and also have a strategic plan for the social media hits that we do as it involves your local option levy, right? And then the final component is public outreach. So, you know, we worked with Chief Schick in his former position and helped them pass a fire levy lid lift that was, and I think it's fair to say, Michael, it was very contentious.
Yes.
It had failed 3 times before, you know, he brought us on board to try to help something like that pass. And, and so a very strong component is public outreach. And so part of that is just developing something like a simple PowerPoint for our chief to go out, not to the public right now, right, as a result of the pandemic, but also marketing his services, if you will, and his presentation virtually, and trying to find ways to connect with people we serve independent of face-to-face meetings. And I would like to cite a real victory we have had, and that's currently a client of ours, is Marion County Fire District 1. And so one of the things that we developed for them as a way to connect with people independent of face-to-face meetings was something simply called Story Time with the Fire Chief or Story Time with the Firefighter. And they have had a huge, huge success with that. I think the last time they posted, I think they got 3,500 views of a story that a paramedic read with his puppy. So it's not only a matter of trying to renew your local option levy. I think one of the things that we bring to the table is adding value to the ambulance district by way of connecting with the people that you serve, right? So you don't only get us helping you to pass a ballot measure, right? You get a communications company that helps you connect with people in, frankly, somewhat desperate times. So, and you have the proposal in front of you. So I would love to field questions from folks and thoughts about what you're seeing. And a final caveat, I want to say, AJ and I have been doing this for almost 20 years, right? We have a 97% win record for the projects that we take on. And when your chief approached us, I grilled him as hard as he grilled me. And we said, yeah, we would like to bid this project because we do feel, despite issues you may be having currently, right, with labor or something like that, we do believe that this is a project that is viable and doable and in the best interest of the folks that you serve. So, yeah, so that's kind of where we are right now. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I have my notes here, right? I'm old fashioned. I write everything down. And so another thing too, so we had 4 clients on the ballot in August, and that was right in the throes of COVID, even though arguably we could say we still are in the throes of COVID, and we won them all. And we won them all because we strategized with our clients about messaging in times of COVID. And we actually were supposed to have 5 clients on the ballot. And when we kind of started assessing voter turnout and assessing how people felt with the current economy, right, we told our 5th client, get off, right? Do not run your ballot measure. And they had a big ballot measure for capital facilities bond. It was about $60 million. And we said, don't do it. Pull it from the ballot, right? So it, again, for us, it's not about just churning and burning. It's about making sure that projects we support that go on the ballot are going to win. And I think that really, frankly, separates us from a lot of folks that you potentially may talk to about doing these kinds of projects. Okay?
So Liz, go ahead. Okay, we got lots of questions.
Great.
Yeah.
John Murphy, go ahead. We'll get you next, Rick.
Of the 4 that you said you had on the last election, did any of those 4 have increased levy amounts?
Yes. They all did. Yes.
Roughly any idea what percentage of a levy increase?
I can't give you percentages, and I think in Oregon we call you Director Murphy, right?
It doesn't matter.
Pardon?
John's fine.
Okay, John. All right. So I can't give you percentages. I'm not that good with math. But in the proposal, you can see, let me see. So Mountain View Fire and Rescue, right? They approved an excess levy of 30 cents per thousand. So technically that was an excess tax, right? And that required also a supermajority to pass. So that was our most challenging project. But you also, and I think we all here recognize the east-west divide in Oregon and Washington, and that's something that we are really well versed in. at Liz Loomis Public Affairs. And so Benton County Fire District 4 was also a huge success for us. And that was a fire levy lid lift of 15 cents. So that was an excess tax of 15 cents. But the point about that within the fire district is they had just passed taxes for schools. They had just passed taxes for a new police, public or police emergency services public facility, right? And we also were involved in passing that bond for them. So the fact that we could even eke out 15 cents for them was substantial. And then we also look at South Whidbey Fire and Rescue. So again, Chief Schick is familiar with that because of course it was in the county of which he used to serve. And South Whidbey was our biggest ask on the August primary, and that was 30 cents per thousand. And that was an excess over what voters had approved before. Why? John, are you thinking of going for more than just a simple?
We haven't discussed it yet. It was just a question.
Okay. Oh, Chief Schick, then you and I are going to have a little talk, aren't we?
That's in the future, maybe. Okay, Rick, you're next.
Okay, Liz, thanks. You answered one of my questions was when you have a 96% win or 97% win record, I assume that you're screening us as much as we're screening you, or you wouldn't
Correct.
take some of us on. I have two other questions. One is about timing. You know, I believe our levy expires at the end of 2021. And so we have an option of May or November. And from just, I guess, working backwards, is May even something we should think about? Or, you know, how do you work backwards and how do you set up your timing for your campaigns? And then I have one more follow-up question.
Okay, so that's probably the best question I've heard so far. All right. So what we are seeing through all of the political pundits and polls, and I don't follow many of them closely, but I do listen to my neighbors, right? So for example, I chair my neighborhood organization and we have monthly meetings with 60 people in them. People are really tired of politics, right? They're super fatigued. And I'm not saying a May timeline for you is unfeasible, right? You want to be on May or November. We all know that, right? For a simple majority to pass. I'm not saying a May timeline is unfeasible, but I think we have to wait until the dust settles on the election and assess voter fatigue. And all of you on this Zoom call tonight are going to be able to do a better job than AJ and me in assessing that, right? So it could be May or it could be November. Now, the only caveat to that is if you need the money in your next fiscal year, and then we have to go for May, right? And
I think we're okay. Yeah, Mike, you're shaking your head, but I think doesn't it expire the end of 22? Or actually, our last one was passed November 8th, 2016.
So it's 21. So we need to get this we really do need to go out by May.
okay, so May it is, right? So you get it for your next fiscal year.
Well, that makes it easier. Yeah.
Yep. So we have our answer there, Rick. All right.
Yeah,
What's your
back
second
up
question?
in my mind. Oh, go ahead, Rick.
Oh, and yeah, just one follow-up question, just on the proposal and the $60,000 number. You have quite a bit of items that you include in your proposal. How do you keep track of? I mean, do we ever run out of time? I mean, maybe we ask you to do there's some trolling going on, or we ask you to make suggestions on our general content, and we kind of run out of hours. Does that buy us a bank of hours, or, and how should we budget for the 60,000 plus the additional charges, which I assume are media buys along with what you have listed as printing and data and postage?
So we don't do media buys. That would be considered campaigning, and we don't campaign. We simply follow Oregon state law to be able to educate the folks that we serve. And when we are under contract with you, there are no hours, right? So it's a project cost to manage this project for you. And so that means if Chief Schick wakes up at 3 a.m. and has an epiphany, or you do, Rick, you can pick up that phone and please call me, and then I will answer it. I have to be honest, I'm going to be asleep at 3 a.m. So if you text me, I'm probably not going to get it.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So it's all inclusive of the entire project, whatever it takes.
It is, with the exception of printing, postage, and mailhouse costs. Okay.
And paid, what do we call it? Paid communications, I assume, is on us.
Paid communications, all that means is you pay to print, mail, and we order the voter list for that.
Okay,
right?
so that's, okay. All right, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, Larry, you were so articulate in the first part of this meeting. I was following you fascinatingly. So you don't have any questions for AJ or me?
Oh, I have plenty of questions.
Bring it. Let's go.
So when have we ever worked together in the past? I mean, you mentioned that you'd worked with our 2 districts. When did that happen?
So we have not worked together in the past. So I have submitted 2 proposals to the fire district and the ambulance district for consolidation efforts, right? And have talked to the former fire chief and had multiple calls with project groups around that. And I understand that things were kind of in flux at that time. And so the fire district chose not to move forward at that time. But trust me, I keep good records.
So I was curious, my recollection is that the last time we had the levy campaign, it was run in-house by Brian Burright. And I'm wondering how much we spent on that effort.
No, we had outside help, or you had outside help for that. And
okay, well, how much did that cost?
We'd have to look that up.
Well, I'd like to know, because as I recall, Brian reached out to a few people in the community for letters to the editor. And I was just curious because it sounds like $60,000 plus other expenses. So I'm wondering how much of a budget we're talking about here to, advocate to taxpayers. So
If I recall right, Larry, we had a group out of Portland and it was in excess of 20,000. I don't know the exact dollar amount. I'd like to know that dollar amount to make sure we're dealing. I don't know if we're dealing apples to apples with what Liz is proposing to do too, but it was well worth having the outside agency help. It made everything from writing the ballot measure to doing the survey and in essence, handling the communication for us much easier.
Okay, well, I'd kind of like to know what numbers we're talking about here. If we're talking about, postage, mailings, printings, any kind of paid advertising, plus the 60,000 plus travel, what are we talking about here as compared to what we spent last time? That's what I'd like to know.
I can assure you there will be no paid travel. So yes, there will be printing, postage, and mailing costs. So that would be interesting to know what you paid in the past. And depending on when your levy was on ballot, you can anticipate that will have increased, right? Certainly after this election, you're going to deal with a lot more registered voters. The good news about Oregon, of course, is that we don't have to mail all households. Unlike Washington, we can only mail registered voters, but it's going to be an added cost for the ambulance district.
It also seems to me that we had that levy passed in May. We decided to go with May in case it didn't pass, and we still had November left to run it. So I believe when you're looking up to see how much we paid, you'll have to look before. I think we went early spring or late fall to go to that agency.
Does anybody remember the vendor?
They're out
Yeah.
of business. Yeah, it was a group that no longer is in business.
I was just
Can
gonna
I ask just a clarification? So we were talking about if the levy ends at the end of 2021, that if we pass a new levy in November, it couldn't take place January 1. Is that what we're saying?
I'm going to push back on that. I think it's 22. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll sit down and
But if it is 21, we have to pass it in May. That's what I
Yes.
heard. Is that right?
Right, but
Yes.
I think it's 22.
Okay.
So if we can go November, you would go May just in case it failed. Then you could come back November, and then you would submit that to the state for the following fiscal year.
Because isn't the levy that we have in place good through November tax collections of next year?
Yeah,
So
I'm showing that it expires December 31st, 2022. So, which we'd have to do in November of next year would be the latest. Well, you could go to May, I guess, of 22, but that would be cutting it very, very close.
Yeah, you're smart to go early, honestly.
Yes.
And I don't, I don't think May of 2021 is improbable, right? Like, I think we can definitely do that. Pushing it out to November, right? If you can do that without risking a loss of revenue for your agency, yeah, we could consider that as well. But, May, if we have to do May, I think that's definitely something we can do because it's a simple renewal, right? If you were looking at an increase, I'd be more concerned, right?
That has not been decided if it's a simple renewal. It's not even been discussed yet.
Oh, excuse me, Cindy. Okay, or Director Russell. Okay. And, the proposal we put forward to you is based on a simple renewal, right? So if at the point that you're considering an increase, then that's certainly something we would like to be apprised about and included in those discussions.
Chief, could you, as a request, just get back to us to make sure we have the timing right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And if we could collect, I know that the vendor's out of business, but if we could collect the historical cost of what we've spent to do the renewal, it should be somewhere in our accounting records for that year.
All right, what else do you have for us?
I think we have, in May, we've got, I think, 3 directors up for re-election or new election. I don't know, does that have an impact at all, Liz?
No, it depends on, and Michael, you and I went through this with your old fire district, right? It really depends on how contentious those elections may be. And so what do you think? I'm asking the board of directors who are on this call right now, are you anticipating contentious elections? That would be a yes. Okay, all right. Yeah, that could change things, right? So, we'd have to know about the date certain by when you need to maintain or increase your revenue. And then I would need to know what potential commissioner races were on the ballot and when. And then I could forecast the ideal time that we should go to ballot, right? So who's up? Who on this call is up for election in May? One?
I think it's Mike, Larry, and Rick.
Okay, all right. And that's great because you are the three gentlemen who have spoken the most this evening. Very interesting.
Liz, did I get the feeling when you were talking, if we go for more than a simple levy, the $60,000 would increase?
No, the project cost is a project cost, right? But at the point you're doing a simple renewal, I think that's going to be your safest bet considering your current labor issues, Director. All right?
Last time we went out for a simple renewal and we came in with, I don't know, 68% of the vote. I think it was something like that. We passed very strongly.
That's great, right? So I've been an elected official, as have many of you. And I do understand that you have labor issues going on right now. Am I wrong?
Nope.
Right.
We're in the middle of a contract, so.
I understand that. And so if some of you want to get elected, that's going to put a lot of pressure on you, right? So at the point that you're on the ballot and asking for an increase on the ballot and potentially facing backlash from your labor group, that's not going to be good, right? So my recommendation is if we're on the May ballot and three of you are on the May ballot, do a simple renewal, because I think then we can separate labor issues from a simple renewal to continue services. And you may need more money, but at the point that you have division in your labor group, it's going to be really darn hard to get that, right?
Oh, a simple question for you. We go out for a simple renewal and then a year from that date, we decide we need more money. It's legally feasible and possible to go out for an increase in our levy, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Even though it might be embarrassing, we can still go out and ask for it.
And it's not embarrassing if you have the call volumes to back it up, Director.
Yeah.
Right? And you know, if you so in this business, right? AJ and I have a 3 strikes you're out policy, right? So we don't take projects where there are 3 strikes. The issues you've got going on right now with your labor union group is 1 strike. The fact that you've got 3 commissioners, all of whom are on this call tonight, on the same ballot that we could potentially be on, asking for a tax renewal or increase, that's a 2nd strike, right? At the point you give us a 3rd strike, then we have problems. We don't have problems yet, right? So my recommendation would be do a simple renewal, right? Have all of you be on the ballot if you want to get reelected. And we can segregate out those 2 issues. And even if labor came forward and was upset about things and made, all of the 3 candidates' life very difficult with opponents and things like that, I still believe your public will pass a simple renewal and will be able to segment in their minds funding what you do as opposed to who the 3 of you are. All right. And so my recommendation would be to do that. And then I don't know if I would go out. I don't know if I would go out within the next 12 months asking for an increase, but after the dust settles over the director races and the renewal race, maybe in 2 years you go out and you ask for a modest increase, right? If you tell us where you want to be, we can get you there, all right? It's not a matter for something like this of being one and done, right? So if we do a simple renewal in May, and then you guys are saying, okay, Liz, we really need another 25 cents. Then we sit down collectively as a group with the board and the chief and his executive management team. And we say, okay, how do we get you to the extra quarter you need, right? But short term, it sounds to me like you've got to get this renewed. Because can I ask the three of you who are on the ballot, are you anticipating a contentious election? And that's a yes. Okay.
I think,
So,
well, I'm still determined. I mean, you can't make a public, it's hard to make a public statement right now. I mean, it's a hard question to answer
sure.
in the public, but also I'm, not sure I'm going to rerun at that point. That's another angle.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. And if you don't, okay, and we don't have to get into this on this call. I understand what you're saying, Rick. All right. But I do think for the benefit of the public that we have to separate out those types of elections from people politics and practical politics, okay? And that's part of the reason I left people politics after being in elected office for 20 years, right? Because it just turns my stomach, right? So,
So Liz, can I ask, if we go to 2022, if that's the case, are we better to get through labor negotiations, because we're still working on last year's contract, and we have hopefully a multiple year contract coming up that we would start negotiating soon, and we get past labor negotiations in the coming several months, elections are settled, and we go to November instead of May with a long thought out plan together with our employees together. Do we take strike two and call it a ball? I mean, are we better off if we have that latitude? I'm just wondering if we're better off to get our ducks, our house in order currently, and then work on the push to get the renewal in November, when we're probably much more cohesive and past all the labor negotiations.
yeah, I don't know if you're going to get through your labor negotiations that quickly, Rick. That's, what I've seen in the press and stuff like that. I personally feel the most important thing that the board can focus on is guaranteeing a revenue stream to save lives and property, right? And so that has to be the first goal, right? And so that has to be, in my opinion, the thing that you do the quickest, because that's very cut and dry for folks, right? Like renewing your local option levy, that's really cut and dry. But when you start talking about commissioner races and you start talking about labor negotiations, there's a lot of emotion that goes into that. And emotion not only from the board side, but also from the public, right? And so I don't see that being a quick fix. I think that that is going to drag on for some time. So I would recommend to you, as I would any client, get the revenue stream secure, right? And then let the chips fall where they may with regard to commissioner races and labor negotiations and, you're a dirty rat. No, you're a dirty rat, and let that play out. Certainly we can help advise the ambulance district about its position in those negotiations. That's part of our contract, right? So not only do we help our clients go to ballot, we also provide PR services for our clients 24/7. So any kind of issue that could potentially impact our ballot measure, we manage that for you as well, right? We don't do your campaigns, right? But if there were certain things going on that you were concerned about with regard to labor negotiations, we would certainly advise the ambulance district about what to say and how to position itself. I mean, here's the thing, folks, right? Like, your job is to save lives. That's it. That's what it comes down to. And unfortunately, as a result of that, being an agency, you have to deal with all these sort of external factors, right? Like politics, like labor negotiations, like apparatus replacement, facilities. You have to deal with all of that, right? But when it comes down to it, how many people have you saved, right? And how many people do you employ, right? So that is really how we want to position you, right? What are your saves that people need to know about? And, you know, and here's an interesting thing too, Chief, right? Like, I'm coming into this meeting not knowing any of the players here except for Michael, right? And I am telling you, and if we work together, this is not going to change. This is how I am, and Michael knows this, right? I'm dedicated to your mission, and your mission is to save lives. And so I don't let personalities get in the way of that. I don't let unions get in the way of that, right? Ultimately, I want to make sure you, as our client, succeed. Crickets. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Mike laughed, at least. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's okay. Hey, John, do you know, is the school going out for anything next year?
Oh, multiple ballot measure requests. That's a good
Have
one.
not heard.
Okay.
So,
Right.
all right.
The last levy passed at 78%.
With no
I would-
controversy.
If I had to venture a guess, Chief, I'd probably say no, since they're not using any of the schools right now much.
Yeah.
Mhm. That was with no controversy, right, Chief?
I wasn't here at that time, but probably not.
Okay. All right.
We had some back and forth between districts, and we weren't combined. We had the past district manager passed away, so we weren't a certain district, but we had strong support from the community. The time before when we went out for the original levy was, I think, 2012, and the economy was still not healed. So we went from, I think, a 25-cent to a 45-cent, and that was harder to get through, but we still managed 58% or so. We're not used to being down in the 50%. We're used to being strongly supported by our community.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Where,
Get spoiled.
where AJ and I come from, anything over 50% is a win.
Yeah.
So Mike, I'm not feeling you there. So can I ask you, like, what are the plans between the ambulance district and the fire district for consolidation? Because that was the last time that we, Chief, that was the last time that we talked with the former fire chief about that.
Which
Yeah.
former fire chief?
Oh, let me tell you, Cindy, which former fire
Gotta
chief?
be Jim.
She's implying that it's been many former fire chiefs that have talked about this.
No,
This
let me
has been-
see. I think I remember writing this proposal when I was visiting my aunt and uncle.
Yeah, it's probably Langborg. Your proposal is dated August 2017.
Oh my God, I don't even have files that long ago. All right. Okay.
So that
Yeah,
would be
so what's the deal with consolidation there, right? I mean, first and foremost, you have to secure your revenue stream, right? But I mean, long term, is it still in play, the consolidation? I mean, we did Lane, right? Lane County
Yeah.
Fire Authority, AJ and I did.
some of these discussions are privileged for executive session.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
So, you know, it's where we are. We've affiliated through WLFEA, and that's all we've done. And any further discussion beyond that's not productive right now.
Okay, sorry, Director.
No problem.
Okay, no worries.
It was Jim Langboard.
Ah, of course, AJ knows. You will find that the real brains behind this operation is this woman with the wonderful golden curly hair down in your left-hand screen.
So Liz, if you're looking at consolidation, though, if we looked at a full-blown consolidation within the districts, we're looking at a blending of tax district where the footprint of Western Lane is different. So it'd be complex to write up a proposal for that. And I think it'd be something that would be years out before we get there.
Okay.
But, you know, long-term, I know it's something we always look towards as far as a possible. Whether we actually go there or not is another story.
Yeah, so just, you know, what's kind of interesting for your information, right? So AJ and I take 16 clients a year for ballots, right? That's it, right? Because otherwise we have a riot on our hands with everyone we work with. But most of the calls we're getting right now, and honestly for AJ, what was Battleground and Battleground and Fire District 3 in Washington? Was that last year?
It was February. It's been a long year.
Oh God, it has been a long year. So most of the calls we're getting right now are for mergers and annexations, right? And so we did a monster one in Snohomish County, Washington, and won that. We have 2 more on the ballot. One in November, or are they both in 2021? Annexation. So anyway, long story short, most of the calls we're getting right now for proposals are for mergers and annexations. So, you know, we see the industry, and we've done this before, but it was kind of trickle, right? Most of our calls have been for bonds and tax increases or levy increases. And now the calls are coming in, and the calls are for, hey, we want to merge, or we want to annex with a neighboring fire district or fire authority. These projects are super encouraging and very positive for people because they provide cost efficiencies and better service. So if and when directors, that's something that you would like to consider, we hope you'll keep us in mind.
Any directors have any further questions for Liz?
No.
I think we can wrap it up, Chief.
Okay, thanks, Liz, AJ. Good to see you both.
Nice
We'll
to
be
see
in touch. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, directors.
Okay, all we have left is director comments. Any directors, would they like to comment? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay.
None at this time, but it's dark outside.
It is dark outside. Yes, so entertaining a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
All
right.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Oh, I sent out the ballot language from 2017, so I think it does expire in 22, but so you'll have that in your email.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chief.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.